Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Beef and Lamb Genetics Sheep Breeders Forum Take 2 for 2021. We thank you all for taking the time out of your evenings to join us tonight and for continuing to support us through the transition to our virtual format. Before we get into the lineup of the evening, we'll get into some quick housekeeping notes. As this is a Zoom webinar, the primary settings will have automatically turned off your videos and microphones. Along the bottom ribbon of your screens, you will see the speech bubble chat icon. For all questions during the presentations, please utilize the chat function and I will circle back to you at the conclusion of each talk for the speaker to answer. If you'd like to clarify a question that you've sent in, there's an option for you to raise your hand. Then we can ask you to unmute so you can ask your question directly. This webinar is being recorded, so if any of you need to leave us partway through the webinar, there will be an email sent out containing a link to the video of this evening's event. If you have any technical issues during this evening's webinar, email info@blnzgenetics.com as listed in your Zoom registration email, and one of our team will be in touch to help you get back online. There will be a couple of polls throughout the webinar asking you to select out of the list of options which best represents your enterprise. To see who we've got signed in tonight, we'll run a couple now. The first poll is asking a bit about our audience. Which of these best describes your involvement in the industry? Breeder, bureau, commercial farmer, science research partner with Beef and Lamb Genetics, or other? You should see the poll pop up on your screen now and you can answer.
Five more seconds. Yep. And we'll wrap it up.
Okie dokie, cool to see a lot of breeders tuning in and a few dabbling through other industry professionals as well. So welcome everyone. Okay, the next one is to ask how many of you are joining us tonight. So you might have a couple of you joining in from one login or just yourself. So the next poll should pop up now.
Five more seconds.
Cool, couple was a few joining you, so that's awesome. Rightio, so now we're going to have a quick look at what we've got coming up tonight before we kick into gear. First up, we will hear from Julia Jones of NZX, who will challenge us to think outside the box with how we adapt for the future. Then we're going to turn to Tom McKim and Craig Salter from Big Safe Furniture, a proudly New Zealand family-owned and operated business committed to sourcing sustainable materials for their future, including New Zealand's wool. Our very own Cara Brosnahan will then give us an update on the busy space that is Beef and Lamb's research programs, including the work the team are underway with on internal parasites and facial eczema. Then we're going to move into our workshop sessions. These two sessions have been pre-recorded and circulated to you all earlier this week. By providing the content in advance, we hope that it allows us more time for interaction and the opportunity to have your questions answered on these two topics. Dan Breyer will then round off the evening by recognising the time and efforts of a few key players in our sheep genetics community for all that they've achieved and contributed to our industry. So to kick us off, I'd like to welcome Julia Jones, Head of Analytics at NZX, to share her perspective on what opportunities exist for New Zealand's sheep industry and the role breeders play in impacting that future. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you. I'm now. How do the slides get up there? Do I have to share my screen again?
Yeah, go for it, Julia.
Cool. You'd think I hadn't done this before, but you'd think after a couple of years of this, we'd all be absolute experts. Look, firstly, thank you so much to everyone for taking the time to listen in the evening to me. I'm going to try my hardest not to be boring. I can't make any guarantees, but please feel free to throw questions as I go, and then they'll get answered at the end. Look, I just wanted to start off explaining, I guess, these are just my perspectives on life through my life experience. I never want people to feel that I think that I'm right or what I say is absolutely how it is. It's all about perspective, and it's all about what we've experienced through life that leads us to, I guess, act in a certain way or believe certain things. And for me, there's a picture of me on my horse with my sister, our horse, riding her to school. I lived in Ross on the west coast of the South Island. It was great, incredible environment to grow up in. Rural communities are the absolute best. My sister tells a great story about being 8 years old, being up in the forest with a machete and her pony and her friend, and they were cutting new tracks. You just kind of, I guess, I don't know, maybe people still do that, but I couldn't imagine it now. We got to have adventure, we got to have all these things, and so I'm really passionate about rural communities and protecting them, but I believe the best way to protect them is to help them understand how to evolve and adapt. My parents lost every property to mortgagee sale, so sadly we had to move a lot, and sadly we had to move away from the west coast. Now, I'm not criticising my parents, but they did the same thing and were quite shocked when they got the same result, and they would often fight change and fight the world and blame others for situations that they potentially, I guess, behaved themselves into, and not because they were bad people or not because they didn't try. Often it was just they didn't understand or know. And then I went into rural banking many years later, and I was sitting on the other side of the table from people who were losing, occasionally, not often, but occasionally were losing farms and were, using the same language that mum and dad used in regards to it being other people's fault, it being about change coming and change was kind of ruining everything, instead of actually, and what I learned was when you find so much time to not change or fight change, even the inevitable change, you exhaust yourself so much that you have nothing left to adapt when you need to. And I think the sad thing is we actually don't get to choose the pace of change. I think we believe we do, but we don't. If we delay change, it will hit us at some point, but the pace of change is not the thing that we get to choose, but the process in which we change often is. I also don't try and pretend to be a farmer. This is my current herd. As you can see, I have no idea about farming. Those two cattle beasts will be pets for the rest of their lives because they're cuddly and they come when I call them, so I now can't eat them. And I have a small miniature pony that wants to kill me on most occasions, and a mentally insane ex-racehorse that thinks he's going to be called up anytime soon to get in the next race. So, this is not about understanding farming. This is about having a beautiful appreciation for the value of farming and understanding the supply chain. But I'm not trying to tell you how to farm, and I'm certainly not here to tell you what you need to do as far as technical things with farming. And I'm sure if you ever talk to any of my neighbours, they would reassure you also that I should never be teaching anyone how to farm, because I certainly give them a bloody good laugh every day. Now, I want to just start looking at the exports for New Zealand. And I think that the reason I would like to look at this is just simply that it is really important for New Zealand that we have this export income. It's significant and we should be proud of it, but we should also know that it is in fact less than 2% of the total global food system. So the total global food system is about $8 trillion US. We earn 47, or I think it was 48 billion New Zealand dollars. And so, we aren't going to feed the world. And I hear that quite often still, and I'm always quite shocked when I hear it. We're not going to feed the world. We were never going to feed the world. There's no intention of feeding the world. But because we are small, it means that we actually have this fantastic ability to be quite agile, to be in niche markets, to actually be a little bit more adaptable and a little bit more agile. And I think that's a huge positive. Here's the bigger breakdown of where those export values come from. And it's really important too to remember that, yes, we do need to protect this income. And that's why often some of this change, and I hear often people fighting change because they say it'll be bad for the income, but we need to actually think about protecting that income. And to protect it, it is about adaptation and evolution, because ultimately customers change. Customers change all the time. New Zealand is really respected, and we should never lose sight of that. I think we've got into this real habit in New Zealand at the moment. One, we are far out. We complain way too much. It's really unhealthy how much New Zealanders complain now, regardless of sector. Right, I work very much in the corporate sector through NZX, and same thing across the corporate sector too. I think New Zealand in general, we've kind of got into this state of moaning and complaining, but the reality is there's lots of good. And one of the things is we are strongly respected for our reputation of producing food around the world. And that's hence why we have been able to get into markets. We've got loads of water, and we have to be careful with water. And just because we have lots of water doesn't mean we don't think about our rivers and we don't care about it, and we've got to think about our oceans and everything too. But for fresh water, we have actually one of the highest levels of available fresh water per capita as well. I went backwards then, sorry. And we actually produce about 10 times the amount of food that per capita as well. Sadly though, we actually have high obesity rates, we have high malnutrition rates, and we have a lot of people in our country that go without food. I'm on a board called Meet the Need. I'm the chair of the board, and that was set up by Wayne Langford and Siobhan O'Malley, and an incredible organisation trying to get, where farmers can donate beef through to food banks, because we want to make sure that nutrition goes in. So although we produce all this amazing food in our country and fibre, it's quite hard for us at times to, I guess, link that back to how well our country is eating. And we actually import a lot of shitty food, to be honest. We export this incredibly nutrient dense, incredible food offshore, like something like 80 to 90% of what we produce, and fibres, and we kind of import a load of crap, right, and eat shit. So I think it's something about, we do need to shift this significantly. And the other thing now is the rest of the world are actually seeing New Zealand as quite isolated. We were considered quite kind of a cool country. We were down the end of the world, nice spot to visit, and now people can't get in. And I do not say that with any level of criticism of how the COVID situation has been dealt with, because I think that is brilliant, and I'm very grateful that my very old father with lung issues doesn't have to worry too much about getting COVID. But the reality of it is, in a commercial sense, the world is starting to see us a little bit isolated when it comes to export. There's a few things we need to think about too because of this. So our digital traceability is really important, and I think this to me, in my mind, feeds right through into genetics. And so we've got to make sure that whatever we are doing on farm through genetics, through any operation, we need to make sure that there's a digital traceability, so that when we've got products going offshore through borders, that there is one, traceability, because that's what governments will demand for border access, and two, it's actually what the customer is demanding, and three, it's actually quite a neat way to connect. When you can't get a person in the country, it's really cool if we can actually connect them in some other way, and we can connect people through that digitizing, connecting them to our farms. The thing is, New Zealand is a little bit funny though, because we do think digital was having a Facebook page, and it is much wider than that. So I guess, do we have, and I don't know, I'm sure there'll be a few allergic reactions to this sort of idea, but imagine in the shearing sheds or in even the sheep yards or something, that you had a camera rolling, and that you had, and maybe some of you do, but you actually had that rolling so that it was a live feed, so people could see what happens and what goes on, and really creating some level of digital traceability. Food insecurity, I've just covered that before. We've seen today that the supermarkets have got hammered again. We need to actually have more channels for food to get into communities and through to people, even the consumer, and that food insecurity. We can't feed 40 million people around the world, which is estimated what we can feed of a portion of their diet, and not be feeding the 5 million that are in our own country. So there's a lot of work needs to be done in that space. And then border access is something we really do need to think more about. And I know it's not in our control. So I know that we're not trade negotiators, and our trade negotiators in New Zealand are really cool. So by the time you see like the ministers going and signing those documents. It's kind of bullshit because like it's already been done. It's already been like the negotiators have already negotiated it and done all the contracts. They're just like wheeled out basically just to sign things off. So our actual negotiators around the world, every country is very tight. They work hard and they work really well together. But the flip side of border access is making sure that it's going to be what other countries want to have as rules to get food in particular into their country and fibres. And so, you know, one of those things will be carbon. There will be some sort of rules around that. There will be rules around, there already are around many countries around human rights. So it was about, I think it was about 2 years ago, there's the Modern Day Slavery Act, and there was a big boatload of produce that was actually turned around from Europe because they couldn't, from New Zealand, that they couldn't prove, or they didn't have actual digital evidence that they had paid people the fair living wage to pick the fruit. So it's those sorts of things that we need to be kind of conscious of what do we need to do. And I think we get quite hung up with a lot of the regulation coming through that it's government just hating farmers or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I don't hang out with them, right? So I don't know what they like or hate. I think the reality of it is, and this is just my perception through life experiences, they're all quite useless. We give them too much credit, any government anyway, doesn't matter what colour, who's in, it's going to be the same stuff. And this isn't coming from them, this is coming from people that vote for them, this is coming from other people. So we just have to kind of be mindful that they aren't leading, they're actually just reacting to a consumer or a community that is pushing for this. So we need to think about how do we influence those communities and those consumers rather than the government. The supply chain insecurity, you know, if you're trying to buy stuff right now, it's probably a bloody nightmare for you. It is quite hard, and these ships, container ships, very difficult to get. It's the big freight or the bulk freight is a little bit more difficult at the moment than the container stuff. You know, ships are getting cancelled. I was at the Red Meat Sector Conference over on Monday, and, you know, there were people talking about, you know, how difficult it is to actually redistribute your containers with the actual boats getting cancelled at the last minute. So these supply chain things will make people think, and they'll probably be a little bit more creative. I do know that some of the planes, I think in New Zealand, redesigned, sort of ripped out the seats basically of some of their big planes, and there is a way to get some produce or product up out of New Zealand via air freight as well. So I don't know, maybe New Zealand needs to buy a boat next. And consumer behaviour change, we need to think about that. You know, we've all just been forced into a different way of living, and maybe not on farm in some aspects, but the reality of it is we all would have in some aspect. I mean, look, I'm really lucky I live in a rural community. Lockdown to me was actually a dream come true. I had a blast. You know, I rode my horse at lunchtime and, you know, walked around my property. I didn't even really never needed to leave, and I got groceries delivered. But there are things that we did differently. There'll be things that people won't change. You know, I'm sure most people will make sure they're never out of toilet paper. I always keep flour in the house now, which is really weird because I barely even really cook or bake. And so, but I ran out of flour and it really annoyed me, and I had to bake with coconut flour. And so now I just have big bags of flour. So there'll be these random things that people will do, and they'll change their behaviour really subconsciously because they were forced into different things that they did. And then we've got to think about climate change. And you're probably rolling your eyes now going, oh, for the love of God, I wish everyone would shut up about this. The reality of it is it's really going to evolve more. And this is where I think when you think of genetics, there's such an important game or part of the game that you can play with climate change. You know, when you think of climate change in a supply chain, and hopefully the Big Save guys go through this as well, but it's when you look at climate change, and if we're all in someone's supply chain. So this is the big thing we've got to think about for New Zealand, right? So whether or not you supply a cooperative or whatever you are supplying with your meat, wool, whatever, they will be inside someone else's supply chain, and whatever that company is, that the supply chain that they're in, they will demand that they record things like the carbon that it takes to produce something. They will want to understand how much people pay people. So this climate change and all these things, they call it ESG, it's just cheesy corporate talk, but we've really got to get our head around this, that we are in fact part of a supply chain, and we need to be quite conscious of this and make sure that when we're doing things, we are measuring. We must measure. We've got to stop conceptually talking. Corporates around New Zealand do these bloody 137-page reports that are just full of scenery, and you know, we've got to measure. We've actually got to get a bit real. I think we need a bit of a reality hammer. We can't be super idealistic either, because we have to transition for change. We can't turn taps off, and we can't completely disrupt communities and environments to change, but we can certainly get on the pathway and have a plan for transition. And it's not about necessarily just mitigating climate change. It's actually about making sure that you and your business are resilient through climate change. Because you think about it, right? Like the world, you know, whether you believe in it or not, or whether you think it was hairspray or it's just come about, the reality of it is we're getting more rain when we don't need it. We're getting less rain when we desperately need it. We're getting huge weather changes, huge weather patterns. You know, I was reading something tonight where it's snowing in Brazil, and it's their summer. You know, there's these insane sort of things starting to happen and these shifts around. So I think it's quite important that we start to adapt our farming practices to make sure that we are able to continue to farm purely based off physical ability, or the fact that the land will act differently under climate change conditions. And that's when you scenario plan, you start thinking about, if it was another degree warmer and I couldn't grow a tree there, how much would I have enough shelter, and all these other things. And when we think of consumers, I kind of want to just rip through these. I mean, don't get upset about alternative proteins or anything like that. It's, you know, I think it's, and that's again back to your genetics, you know, but think about the attributes that the consumer might want. So when we're setting in place genetics, we've got to be really careful. Is it something that you are individually interested in breeding? And that's cool if you are. This is not a criticism, just an observation. The key is, do you want to do it out of interest sake, or are you trying to create an income out of this? And there's going to be sort of a business model thing in there. So you need to think through your business model, that it's cool if you want to breed whatever breeds because you want to, and that's an interest of you. I think you've got to be really careful that if the consumer, or there isn't a market for that particular breed, or it's not a growing market, or the attributes won't fit with the future, then that could be a risk to the business model side of it. So it's kind of really more of an interest rather than an impact. So, you know, diverse pantries, we're going to see people eating different things. We'll have family members, some will be on alternative proteins, some will be on animal only. You know, some families will not feed their children, and you know, my personal view is, nor should you, alternative type proteins, you know, because of the lack of actual nutrient in them in comparison to animal proteins, whereas some adults may have animal proteins for vast amount of reasons. We've all heard about the flexitarian. You know, I just think of that as, I think the best example I heard of that once was a girl at Massey said that you're a vegetarian until you get drunk and then you have a Big Mac on the way home. Consumers are focusing on immunity, and through COVID, what we learned is those who had a low immune system were at very high risk. So it's really important that people are trying to target their immunity. The social media, look, social media brings people together and does magical things. It can also be quite difficult and demoralizing. So an example, I spoke at an event, there was a young 16-year-old girl, she had a real Greta moment. She was just shaking and yelling at me, telling me that I romanticized an industry that pumps their animals full of antibiotics and jams them in small spaces. I had no damn idea what she was talking about. I was like, well, I don't remember. Anyway, I asked her how many farms she'd been on, and she'd never been on one. So we've got someone there who is influenced through influence, not influence through experience. And that's what we're battling with a little bit. You know, it was kind of a bizarre, I mean, we got through it in the end, but, you know, she had in her mind this belligerence that whatever she'd seen or read was real, but it wasn't even New Zealand. So I think when we just have to accept that there will be people out there like that. And I mean, we all had dumb ideas at 16. Geez, I had some crazy shit ideas. I wanted to be the president of the United States of America until I was about 20. But, you know, I think in that sense, we're going to have a lot of people that will potentially have an opinion or a view without facts. We've got to be really careful how much oxygen we give them and how much air we give back to them, because they will continue. That, you know, there will be extremists, and let's not get hung up on extremists. I don't like seeing on Twitter and that where people go, oh, vegans are dicks and they just hate this and hey vegan. You know, we can't assume just because someone's a vegan that they have some evil underlying purpose. They are just making a diet choice, which is actually none of our business. It is extremists that go crazy and do crazy shit, not vegans. There's quite a difference. They might be the same at sometimes, but let's not kind of just put everyone in the same bucket. Transparency, please don't underestimate the importance of transparency. When we have a lack of information for people, they start to make it up. And it is so important that we actually have a great deal of transparency with everything that we do. And look, the planet-based foods is self-explanatory. Getting away from plant-based foods and making sure people understand the planet-based foods. And this is where, with your genetics, if there are attributes, all of these things, they must be talked about. They must be really obvious, and we must get them out there. Look, as farmers, again, I'm going to go back to transparency and you're going to get sick of it, but I know that you probably didn't start farming or breeding because you necessarily want to be exposed to the world. You did it because you love what you do and you're really passionate about it. And part of it might have been the attraction of isolation with some of the farming spaces as well. But it doesn't mean that you have to be a Kardashian. It doesn't mean you have to let people into every part of your life. But the more we can allow people into, I guess, farming, to understand farming, the more we can actually combat that real extreme view by bringing balance to it. We've got to adapt. And I think, all these three things sit together. When we adapt, let's be really transparent about that adaptation. Also, let's be really transparent about the things that we haven't done yet, that we need to still do, and not be afraid to actually be open about that. And yep, someone's going to climb on you and give you a hassle about it, but that is just life. We need to actually stick together, be brave, and actually adapt, create transparency, and then build trust, and also learn to trust. I don't think it's just about us. And when I say that we need to build trust in others, please don't take that as an offensive thing that, that no one trusts anyone in the world now. This is not a farmer, non-farmer thing. This is just a human thing. And how do we build trust as humans? How do we reconnect? And a lot of people don't have connection with a farm. So their only connection might be what they read or what they might see on a packet. We've got to take back control of our narrative or our story, and the story has to include reality. I think what we miss sometimes is we forget to be real. So we think story means telling people only the good things. And please don't get me wrong, I love seeing a lamb in a little jacket more than anyone. But I've learned, even when vets put stuff up that might be a bit, for me, I still read it and I learn about it because it's a way to learn. And I think there are things that with our stories, we just need to tell the truth and people will start to. And yes, you can be slightly selective with the truth because we don't want to be, telling everything right now. But there's the difference between trying to force information down people's throats and also helping them understand what do they want to know. And we really need this integrated collaboration. We need to work together. We need to be thinking about, and geez, I feel like a broken record. I swear I've talked about this about 50,000 times, but if not millions, but it's this collaboration is working together. I think we always try and get solutions in isolation, and this is where we get into danger, right? So if you're doing genetics, surely you're speaking to consumer markets companies to make sure that the genetics that you're working towards that are going to take years actually align with what the future trends are likely to be. And I know you can't necessarily always pick exactly what those trends are, but there are enough signals to give you kind of some reassurance for a 10-year kind of window. And I think it's about making sure that our sectors are integrating more, that they're working together, and that the innovation is actually rewarded on collective outcomes or collective positive outcomes, rather than actually at the moment we tend to sort of think, if I talk to dry stock farmers, they're like those poor dairy guys, geez, the sunset industry. I go talk to dairy farmers and they're like, oh, those poor dry stock people, the beef industry is going to be like sunset industry. And the reality of it is, you talk to kiwi fruit and they think everyone should rip every animal out and just stick a bloody plant in it. And it's just the reality of it is we actually all win or all lose. Like there is no one sector that is going to be more magical or succeed. I think we need to get in this together. And that's where, again, I think it's important that we do work together. And it is frustrating to work with government in certain parts, and they might not communicate well. No government does. But we have to learn to work out a way to work with them. We've got to work with our offshore companies to make sure that when we're in their supply chain, that we are identifying and measuring the things that they need to measure to show their investors or their other customers. And we've got to be working in with these to make sure that we actually set ourselves up for success, because this country is freaking awesome. The way we produce, is magnificent, and we just don't give ourselves enough credit for it. We are just hung up on complaining right now, and and I know people are tired, and I know everyone's overwhelmed, but we need to realize that life is about choice, and life is shit. And don't get me wrong, I lie on the couch and I bawl my eyes out on a regular basis, and I get overwhelmed and I get really tired, but I actually make sure I get myself in the right headspace every day to get up and take the world on, because we've got to start looking for solutions and stop constantly trying to find problems. There will always be problems, but we have to go searching for solutions. And I feel like I just rambled on. If anyone wants to make a complaint about my annoying conversation, then you can email me or contact me on these details.
Thanks so much, Julia. Some really, really great food for thought there and perspectives. Really appreciate that. We've got time for a quick couple of questions. So one's come through from Annie O'Connell. So Julia, do you have any insights into how we could tackle the feed our 5 million first? It is an idea that resonates, but we have been dependent on profit from our exports. How do we value ourselves, pay for our own produce first?
Yeah, that is, oh God, I wish I had the answer to that question. And look, I'll be honest, with Meet the Need, our version of success has never been needed. So we would love to have no need. I know that KPMG are working really hard on this and a New Zealand food strategy. So one thing we have missing is we don't have a food strategy, and that can be part of it. That is also around education. The scary thing is when food bank parcels go out, they're often full of biscuits and chippies and all these things. And it's actually getting nutrient dense foods into kids, and oh God, I absolutely wish I had the answer for you. I'm concerned that we keep putting our hand out to farmers. Farmers, please take on board how incredibly generous you are, ridiculously generous, because I know that you'll have at least 10 probably different organisations that you're donating something to provide food. But I think, again, it's about getting government agencies on board, and I think we've tried to solve the food problem within the food sector, and this needs to be a health issue, health sector thing. It needs to be a Ministry for Social Development thing. It needs to be a whole lot of our government agencies need to come together in this as well. That was a terrible answer, I'm sorry. So basically the short answer is I have no idea, but I can assure you there are people working on it, and I'm certainly banging on about it as much as I can.
Yeah, it's a tough question. Another one from Annie. Does New Zealand have a story to tell about our environmental footprint per capita that we feed rather than per capita that live here?
Oh, that's such a brilliant question. It's about data and measure. So yes, it does, but we don't. I think Ritter Institute with the Delta model, terrible name for a model by the way now, but it wasn't at the time, but no, the Delta model was brilliant that Ritter Institute have got, and they are working really hard to do that whole carbon footprint per capita and also put it into nutrition. So I'll give you a random example. So you could either have 3 glasses of milk, or you could have 1.5 kilos of broccoli to get some calcium. I know what I'm going to choose. Also, the broccoli wouldn't digest very well in your gut, certainly give you green poos. And I think the whole idea there, and it would also stuff up your calorie intake and the rest of the nutrients. So, and then if you look at how broccoli's growing, quite a lot, probably a lot more energy that goes into it with transportation and carbon and stuff like that. So we do need to start breaking down more to nutrient and per capita. But New Zealand actually has a great story to tell about our environment. I think we just forget to tell people. We do these things and we're so humble, and we've almost got to stop being so humble and actually tell people, but not tell people with anger, not tell people with frustration, tell people with pride. Because if we don't feel proud of what we do and we are waiting for external validation on that, we're never going to get it. So let's just actually have our pride, express pride, and show what we're doing. Show how you're planting things out. Show how you move your animals. Show your beautiful paddocks. Show all these things. Show your clean water, and just keep showing it and keep showing it and keep showing it.
Yeah, it's a great point.
And measure.
2 great questions. Thanks, Annie. One more. Our exports grew from 36 billion to 47 billion over 6 years. Did we do that by increasing value rather than production? And will we be able to grow value by another 25% in the next 5 to 10 years? And how?
Yeah, it is actually a mix of both. So yes, it was some volume. I feel sad for farmers sometimes when we talk about volume, because I know that the pressure was from government, was from industry bodies, it was from everyone, right? I went in a bank and we used to tell people to buy the farm so you can produce more, buy the farm next door or buy the land. So yeah, so some of it was probably, if we break it down, it's probably mostly volume though. Rather than value, but some of our value add products, and I think we've got to remember that value begins behind the farm gate. So when we're adding value to our products, it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be turned into a magical fruit drink or something like that. It could be that, or a fancy piece of meat. It could in fact be how we market an existing, how we've actually bred something, or how we've actually grown something, or the actual contribution to the land that brings with it. So it's really actually going to be about the markets that we're in and the value that we add. But we will continue to most likely be more of an ingredient supplier, or rather than being directly going into these fancy new products.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Julia. And unfortunately, that's our time, but thank you very much for joining us. Again, some really great perspectives, and I hope everyone's been able to take away a bit of food for thought on what our futures look like.
Oh, look,
Thanks
and if
again.
anyone has any questions, feel free to email me anytime or flip me a text. I'm really happy to. And also, challenge if there's things that didn't make sense that you challenge me on. I think it's great, because that's how I learn and I grow. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks very much, Julia. Great to have you involved.
Thank you.
So with the year that was COVID-19 in 2020, many businesses, as Julia alluded to, refocused their values as consumer perspectives changed. This has seen a focus on homegrown innovation and materials that are as good for human health as they are for the environment. Big Save Furniture, a proud New Zealand family-owned and operated business, has committed to using more renewable sources in their furniture. Thanks to the many benefits of wool, including its biodegradability and other attributes such as being naturally fire retardant and allergy friendly, it has been a natural fit for Big Save. Their wool sofa range is already proving a hit with consumers, and they've got more exciting product development in the pipeline. Here to tell us firsthand, directors Tom McKim and Craig Salter are here to tell us how they plan to work together with farmers to develop products that will not only benefit customers, but also us Kiwi farmers. Thanks, Tom and Craig.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
I'm Tom, and this is Craig.
How are we?
So, look, I thought we'd give you a little bit of background. We're in a little bit of a messy room here, but this is one of our product development rooms, so we can hopefully show you some of the stuff we're working on. It's very exciting. But I'll give you a little bit of background about Big Save. My father started it in 1973 in a place called Paparam, just north of Wellington. And from there, we've grown to be the largest furniture retailer in New Zealand across furniture and bedding. We've got 24 stores from Whangarei to Invercargill. We're massively vertically integrated, so we own as much of the supply chain and parts of the business that we can. So we own all the properties, we own all the product development, we own all the trucking, so all the parts that we can control to get a really good outcome for our customers. And we're really, really excited about where we're getting to now with bringing back a lot more control in that supply chain, and a huge part of it is wool. So Craig will tell you a bit about how we've and what we're developing and the different products, but how we've got to where we are was it's sort of stars aligning in good ways and bad ways. And obviously we've all been hugely affected by COVID. And just prior to COVID, we were looking at our business model and looking at our supply chain, and we're actually developing a product which was using recycled plastic bottles from the ocean. And they strip it down, they strip the material down, and then make it into a fabric. And this is a piece of fabric here. It's called Sequel yarn. Adidas and Nike use it in a lot of shoes. And most of those bottles are out of the ocean through the Mediterranean. And now we've got another range of fabric we're getting out of bottles through the ocean in the Pacific. Very, very cool material. But what we were doing there was just looking at the impact Big Save was having on the New Zealand environment with the amount of plastic that we were producing across our lounge suites and our beds. Things like a mattress like that there is covered in plastic. So we wanted to help in any way and just see what would happen. Well, we developed this bed, and within 6 weeks of it hitting the floors before COVID hit, it became our biggest selling bed. And then very shortly after that, it became the biggest selling bed in New Zealand, quantity-wise. And we could go through 8 to 10,000 of those beds in a month. So it's very, very big volumes. The success of that and part of what we were doing with that was we were trying to see what customers were interested. Our naivety was thinking that this is a young customer that's 25 years old that cares about the environment, and maybe old customers don't worry as much. Well, it turned out through moving a lot of these beds that it was every person cared. As long as you created a great product and the price point was at a go price, everyone cared. So in developing that, we started to look at lots of other pieces that we could put in and say, well, what are the fibres? What are the coverings? There was then another thing happening where the New Zealand government was coming at us, and they were coming at the whole furniture industry, saying that we need product to be flame retardant. We need sofas and beds to have flame properties. And really the only way in the past you've been able to do that is using chemically based foams, which are carcinogenic, proven to cause a lot of cancers. So we were very much against that. And I'd worked in a business in the UK doing that in furniture, and we didn't want it at all. So we were looking at that thinking, how do we get that across the line? And then we're lucky enough to have our business based in Hawke's Bay, and we're friends with a lot of farmers, and we've had businesses that are linked to farms, and we're out one day with a mate of ours, and he's digging holes, burying a lot of his crutching wool at his farm. And we were talking to him about his pricing, and he was talking to this was the second year where he was paying out a check to lose money as he was sharing. So it was like all the stars were coming together, where we were looking at all these different things and saying, well, hold on, we've got wool. It's such a great product. What can be done with it? And very quickly with some great people in our business and product development, we were able to say, look, let's start taking out polyester and let's start inserting back wool. And Craig could probably lead from that and tell you a bit about what we do with our products and what we're doing in the future.
Yeah, it was actually like Tom said, when we started sort of on the wool journey, we didn't sort of know where it was going to take us, and it's really actually started very, very quickly in the journey. And one of the things that we thought as a large business that wool was going to be quite niche related and probably didn't have any parallels with our business. But as we started to get into the supply chain, and the previous lady kind of mentioned supply chain, we worked out that there was so many people in the actual supply chain from the farmer to the end product, which actually created this false economies of price, which when we looked at actually, it looked unobtainable for us to actually use in our product. But when we started having different meetings with different people across the industry, we actually worked out by deconstructing the supply chain, we added them all up at one point, and I think it was about 14 or 15 different people in the supply chain. And with our current supply chain, we've got 4. So we've been able to remove all those people out of the supply chain, which has actually been able to get us closer to the farm and the farmer and work out what the actual problem was, and actually take the product and start putting it into our furniture. Hopefully, visually, you'll be able to see some of this stuff. But as Tom sort of mentioned, the first thing we actually did is just started with a 360 gram layer, which we wrap over the foam of all of our lounge suites. So gone is normally you have a foam layer, some polyester, and then some fabric. Well, now what we've done is we've replaced the polyester with this nice wool layer, and we've also replaced the fabric in quite a few cases now with a wool fabric as well. And as mentioned before, the consumer's really, really loving it. One of the other by-projects of having many conversations with lots of people is we've come with the same layer, but there's actually, I'm not sure if people may have seen this, but there's a slit through this, and it's actually used instead of spraying for round trees. So one of the local guys here, a guy Andy Lowe, he's just put in 30,000 native trees, and he's just running a concept on trial on this. So basically it goes around the tree, clips on, and then it's staked down, so there's no need to spray. So obviously with using it with a pine tree, that's that one spray, but with the native, with the 2 sprays, you don't have to worry about going back the second time.
Part of what we've done with this breaking of the supply chain was by being able to go as close as we could get by getting close to the farmer, we can give them a good price. We're very open and transparent as a business model to make sure that in anything we're doing with supply chain, the people that are adding the most amount of value need to get the most amount of money to stay alive. And something we're doing with this wool thing is saying that we believe that currently the $4.50 a kg for wool should be the bare minimum that is the pricing of wool, and it will, we believe, go up from there. So if there's one thing you take away from tonight, please don't get rid of your sheep. We are definitely going to need them. And that's just not with what we're doing. That's certainly what's going to happen across all industries. Plastic is on its way out. Natural fibre is on its way back in. And part of that is some of the stuff that we were doing in the 1950s and 1960s was awesome stuff. We need to go back to that, and we need to bring in the new technology of what will be 2050 with using robotics and some automation so that we can get these natural fibres into the market. There isn't actually a price barrier here. People keep talking about price and that wool's expensive. There isn't. If we're able to cut that waste out of the supply chain, those middle people that were clipping the ticket, get direct to farmers, and then what will end up happening with that wool is get a little bit of smarts around it, start going back to the grading we were doing, start looking at those micron levels, start looking at the breaks in the fibre, and start using big quantities of it. You know, our goal across furniture is to get it into all of our lounge suites, get it into all of our beds, and then ship it offshore to our friends, big manufacturers, robotic plants up in Vietnam, China, America, and start putting it over there because they're facing the same problems we are. Their governments are saying, you know, your lounge suites need to be flame retardant. Well, really the only way to create a flame retardant sofa without putting chemicals in your foam is wrapping it with wool. And there'll be a lot of product development we're looking at where we're combining products. We're looking at hemp and flax and fibres going into wool to give it even more strength in different areas. Do you want to tell them a bit about NOPS?
Yeah, well, one of the other things we found is sort of Tom mentioned it's this 90s, 50s and 1960s knowledge. And every time we go and meet someone that's got a lot of this knowledge, they actually seem to be in their 60s and 70s. One of the products that we've bought ourselves actually our own carding machine, our own needling machine. So we've started actually in the next 2 weeks creating our own layers. But one of the byproducts that we learned about from a guy is in the carding machine, someone put one together backwards about 20 or 30 years ago. And what it actually did is instead of creating one of these nice sort of flat, fluffy layers, it did the reverse and actually created a whole lot of balls. It's called a knop, a K-N-O-P. At some stage when you've got time, have a look online and you'll see it. And we've actually started to develop another separate range using that. So we've got duvets coming through. We've actually got a wool pillow that's about to hit the market. The one thing that we've actually tried to do with everything we're doing is maximize the amount of wool that we use. The lounge suite we've got out there, I think the number they got to is 22 kilos of wool. We've got a new bed that's about to hit the market, arrives on the 20th of August. And when we were developing the bed, the first few layers the guys put in, we said, like, how much wool's in the bed? And he said, oh, look, I think we got to 2, maybe 2.5 kilos. We're like, no, we need to get more. And we got to 3, and then we got to 3.5, and then we got to 4. And then I was talking to this farmer friend of ours. I said, look, what's the average amount of wool that comes off a sheep? And he says, oh, look, mate, I reckon it's about 6.5 kilos. So part of the sell story with that bed is we've managed to stuff one whole sheep into the bed. So we've got 6.5 kilos of wool in the bed. The one thing that we found by removing the foams and the polyesters is we're actually not affecting price points. So we're actually putting a better product into our product and remaining price point. And it's allowed, I think, for us to actually see our customer actually cares. I use the example of when we were with COVID and there was everyone, I live in town, I live on a hill, and every Thursday I'd go for a walk and everyone's recycling was out. So you'll obviously notice that everyone was slowly becoming more and more of an alcoholic over time. But every Thursday, everyone was recycling. And I'd have to say, since we've come out of lockdown, I would say 80% of people have stayed recycling, whereas previously I would have thought we maybe be at 20 and 30. So we're seeing these behavioural changes. And when we started down this journey, we were after the 30 and under customer. But what we're finding with this product is it's actually across all age groups. And especially the one thing that we're really loving about the wool thing is you actually don't have to do anything to it to put it into furniture. It's amazing property. All the strength properties, the fire retardancy, the heat holding it, the dispersal of moisture. It's all great things for furniture.
Yeah, I think the other thing, just going back to what Julia was saying, and there are things that will be coming and over time, but one of the ones Julia mentioned there was transparency. There's no question about it that is really important. You know, customers, they want to know that what we're saying as a retailer and what our salespeople are telling our customers is actually true. And I was talking to a friend of ours who's a farmer, and I was talking about air tag tracing on sheep. And he was semi-reluctant. And I said to him, well, look, I can understand you're reluctant. I think we've got our own sheep with our own farms now, and looking at the cost of it, I think we're about $1.20 an air tag. But as I said to him, look, if I can guarantee you $8 a kg for your strong wool, will you put on air tags? And he said, yeah, look, no trouble, as many as you need. Now, that's the future. It's going to be working together to create these results that get a better outcome. If air tags for sheep gives the customer the ability to trace their product, there's a very cool company out there called Sheep Inc., and you're able to trace your jersey and trace your sheep that you can buy online. But if that's going to add value and customers may pay more, but the farmer ends up getting more, then it's a very simple thing to do. So I think there'll be the evolution of this stuff is going to be working together and working closely. We're super excited. I mean, for once now, we've got really good control of a great raw material. We can build it brilliant for the New Zealand public, but then we can also do very well out of it, shipping it offshore. I think, the one thing that COVID's done in our world, it's given New Zealand a massive advantage now. It's broken the supply chain, and the new world is a hybrid. Businesses like ours and lots of other businesses got very lazy on relying on low wage rate countries, whether it was Vietnam, Thailand, China. What's going to happen now is countries will stand on their own 2 feet for where's best to manufacture. Well, there's no question about layering manufacturing in wool in New Zealand and then use that in the country, but also then use it offshore, ship it offshore as a finished product. So the value of New Zealand strong wool is definitely going to increase, and it is a fabulous product. I mean, we know it for what we need it for, but then there's just so many other businesses that we've met in the last year that are doing great things with it, across new flooring that's attacking across those plastic floors or carpets. And there's some really good stuff happening. So I would the biggest thing I'd love everyone to take away is, and we would like everyone to do, is keep your sheep and stay very, very positive about the future of New Zealand strong wool.
Cool.
Thanks very much, guys. Some really positive messages for wool producers, which is, a pleasant change for a lot of these guys. We've got a few questions that have come through. How important will the ethical story of growing wool be to your business? Is it more the biodegradable feature of wool as a natural fibre, or the story of how wool is ethically grown, and then the personal story of how people involved in growing, harvesting and preparing the wool?
Yeah, I suppose I can take the first part and Craig can do a second part. So I think the transparency part is really, really important, that people know where the product's coming from. But we're getting a huge amount of feedback now where people are looking at the cycle of a product. What am I left with? And we all look at it when we're doing our recycling. If I'm going to buy something, now if you're going to buy a bed or you're going to buy a lounge suite and you buy it in New Zealand, 99% of the time at the end of its life, that bed's life or that sofa's life, it's going to end up in a landfill. So what we're looking at is saying, how do we either create a recycling process for the product we sell, so it's a full circle, or how do we ensure that if it does end up in a landfill, it's good for the environment, it can biodegrade and it's not there for 1,000 years. So there's a huge amount of importance in that in relation to what we can insert into our products, and wool is brilliant from that point of view. In relation to the ethics around how wool comes off, yes, there is a lot in that, and there is a lot of people who care about that. And what we're looking at is partnering with supply chain where we can get transparency and we can get the right practices happening, and it's economically viable. So there is a lot happening in that space, and there is still a lot of stuff to be learned, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
What in your mind is the biggest risk to use wool in your business? What as growers should we make sure we avoid?
Look, I think probably we need to get back to treating it like it used to be treated, as a great income source before it actually becomes a great income source. I think, we need to get back to the classing. We need to concentrate back on micron levels. Like one of the things that we're seeing with the different products that we can create, we can create a product out of the dag wool, so we can take that out of the market. We're working with another business who can take the slight wool, so we can actually start taking the different classes out of the market and using it for different purposes. So I think for strong wool to get the premium pricing that it will in the future, is we need to treat it like it was in the past. I think what's ended up happening over the last few years, only anecdotally from what we see, is that because there's been no value to the product, then it's basically get it off as fast as we can and get it gone.
Yeah, cool. So how soon can any old Joe Boggs commercial farmer sign up with Big Save to supply strong wool?
That's a great question, and I can tell you we've had a lot of people asking. So look, at the moment we've got a bit of a closed supply chain because I used this terminology in another wool meeting we were having today. We have got a tiger by the tail in relation to we have got lots of product that we want to get out there, and it does use a lot of wool. Our biggest hold up at the moment is manufacturing it here. Our machinery that we're needle punching on should have been operating 6 weeks ago, and power components are delayed because of COVID. So unfortunately, our product development teams and our manufacturing team on this side is constrained a wee bit by speed to manufacture. We do know that over the next 12 months, that volume of being able to manufacture is going to lift up massively. And that's where we will see the entire, that wool pricing slowly starting to move. We have seen it move just closely. It's one of our goals in this, is this actually looking at the strong wool price. We keep our business very, very simple. And one of our gauges is saying what's happening to that price. So at the moment, we are a closed supply chain. However, we are going to be talking more and more and more to different farming groups and then just opening it up. And if that strong wool price is going up, ourselves and about 6 to 10 other businesses with flooring in different areas are doing the right thing. And so stay in there and keep getting wool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks very much, guys. Just a couple of comments to pass on. Kate Broadbent says yeehaw, and Julia Jones says incredible messaging. This has been amazing. So thanks very much, team. It's been really great to have you on.
Guys, really
thanks for your time.
Thanks, Sarah.
Cheers.
Now I'd like to welcome Beef and Lamb's own research program's senior advisor, Cara Brosnahan. As a part of the research team, Cara works with farmers to help identify research needs, assist scientists to deliver research, and communicate their findings into practical forms for farmers to use. 2 of the major research programs currently being undertaken by Beef and Lamb are around the space of internal parasites and facial eczema, which Cara will share an update on now. Thanks, Cara.
Thanks, Sarah. Just going to try to share the screen. Okay.
Yeah, that's
good to go.
Yep.
Amateur here. They were 2 hard talks to follow, but I will do my best. So as Sarah said, I'm Cara. I'm a scientist in the research team here at Beef and Lamb. And the research team sits within Farming Excellence, which genetics is also a part of. And as part of my role at Beef and Lamb, I am, I focus on animal health. So as Sarah said, facial eczema and internal parasites. So I'll be going over what we're doing in that space. But first of all, I'll just run through at high level what the research team actually does. So we identify research needs in partnership with farmers, and this is through UMR surveys, farmer councils, through the Farmer Council Conference, or talking to extension managers, and also through our Farmer Research Advisory Group, and then ensure these needs align with the Beef and Lamb New Zealand strategy. We design, lead and manage research projects, so we do take them right from the technical detail where we're quite involved to managing the tracking of the project itself. And we work with other scientists to deliver this research. And we want really robust peer-reviewed science so that we are giving the best to our farmers. And one of the most important parts of the process is actually being able to communicate these findings to the farmer to improve uptake and actually make a real difference. So these are some of the things we are thinking about when we initiate a program and also right throughout. So is this the best science we can do? So with any problem that we're trying to solve, we take a look at the literature, see what's been done both nationally and internationally, and so we can build on that knowledge rather than just repeating what's already been done. And then also looking at other technologies just to see if there's any other way we could actually solve this problem. We're also thinking about, will the research make a difference? Because ultimately that's what we want to invest in. And obviously, so can our farmers use the research? And this is really important. So we undertake research in a wide range of areas, obviously genetics and animal health, as I've talked about, but also all of these areas. For example, with greenhouse gas mitigations, we work with the Pastoral Greenhouse Gas Research Consortium to find ways to mitigate methane. And so I'll just be talking about a couple of areas now, facial eczema and internal parasites, and what we're doing in this area. So this is just a very potted history of the facial eczema science in New Zealand, and this is just the significant events. So there's obviously a lot of other research that's gone into this area, but these are the main events. So facial eczema is not a new disease to New Zealand, been here for over 100 years. In the 1950s, we found out that it was attributed to a toxin-producing spore of a fungus, and this fungus is right throughout New Zealand and in the pasture. So a lot of work at that stage went into being able to quantify the number of spores and some management tools as well. In the 1980s, genetics got involved and Fe tolerance was found to be heritable, and then these programs were initiated. So why are we investing in facial eczema research? So it is still a top animal health priority for our farmers. When we do surveys, this always comes out as number 1 or 2, so it is important. There are animal welfare implications. There are limited treatment options available for farmers, and the selection for Fe tolerance requires an invasive test, and I will talk about this soon and what we're doing in this space. There's huge impact on farmer well-being, obviously seeing the stress of the animals suffering in conjunction with having limited management tools to actually address this. And it is a large cost to the industry. So it's been estimated up to $200 million in severe years, and this is just based on clinical signs of disease. So if you added in the impact of subclinical disease, then this figure is likely to be a lot higher. So why do we need new science? Most of the research is over 50 years old, particularly in those original management tools, apart from genetics. And with new technologies over the past 50 years, we think there can be more accurate and effective tools for farmers. There are also some emerging risks with the current tools that are available. For example, zinc oxide is going to be banned in the EU from next year as a treatment for pigs. So we just need to be aware of these things and have other options available for farmers. Also with the climate warming and the climate change, the likelihood of the fungus increasing its distribution and therefore Fe spreading is likely. So again, we just need to be aware of these potential risks. And ultimately, Fe still hasn't gone away. It's still a major problem for farmers. So what we're doing in collaboration with AgResearch is undertaking a research program proposal. And this does have the ambitious goal of eliminating facial eczema as a disease of livestock. So as I said, we're in partnership with AgResearch on this, and also scientists from Manaaki Whenua, and we have developed a program proposal based on the science knowledge gaps that exist and where information needs to be identified so that new tools can be provided to farmers. So for the last couple of months, we have been discussing this proposal with industry partners. So that because this is such an ambitious goal, we do need a sector-wide approach and everyone to be on board. So it's really exciting because there's been a lot of support and interest through these engagements, and just to find solutions and knowing that they still need to be found. So we're looking to submit this proposal to MPI for co-funding, and this is definitely still in proposal stage, so it is a long process. So we're looking at a large area. The focus of this program is very broad. So it goes right from the fungus and the toxin itself through to the pasture, so identifying management tools for the pasture and also new tools for the animal. Also, the economic and social impact on farmers will be a large part of this to really understand how much of an impact it's having. And adoption and implementation will also be carried out throughout this program. So we really want farmers to be on this journey so that any tools that will be developed are practical and also they are adopted early. So because this program will take a while until we know if it's successful, the first steps we are investing in is looking into an alternative test for Fe tolerance. As I'm sure you're all aware, the current test involves dosing rams with a known amount of toxin and then assessing the effects so that those rams can be, the Fe tolerant rams can be sold to commercial farmers. So there are obviously issues with this in terms of animal welfare implications of dosing animals with a toxin. It is not readily accepted by all farmers. It is the only test that's available. And so with an alternative test that may be more acceptable, then the genetic gain may be more advanced. There's also potential consumer concerns about having an invasive test like this. So we're looking at new science to avoid the need for invasive animal testing. And Axel Heiser at AgResearch is leading this program. So what do we need in a new test? So we want something that's minimal impact on the animal. So we are looking at blood, saliva, and fibroblast cells from an ear punch. We obviously want it to distinguish between tolerant and non-tolerant animals so that those genetic selection decisions can be made. We need it to be reliable and cost effective and also suitable for a commercial laboratory. So by the end of this project, we want to be collaborating with commercial laboratories so that it is available for farmers. So there are 4 phases of this project, and we're taking a phased approach so that at each stage we can stop and assess the science to make sure it is still worth investing in. And we can be quite critical of it. So phase 1 has been completed, which was to establish the cells in the laboratory initially. So as I said, that we're testing blood cells, saliva, and fibroblasts, growing them up in the laboratory, and then exposing those cells to the toxin and not, and then assessing the cells that are exposed to toxin and not for certain biomarkers, so using genes, proteins, and metabolites. This phase was successful, and there were biomarkers that were found between the toxic cells and not, so it was looking promising to progress into phase 2, which is exciting. And phase 2 is testing animals that are known to be susceptible or tolerant, and then looking at those biomarkers again to actually narrow it down and identify something for a test. So assuming that will be successful, we would move on to phase 3, which is developing it into a high throughput, low cost test. And then finally, a validation process, which will be testing a large number of animals on the procedure. So if this is all successful, we'd be looking at a test available mid-2023. Okay, onto internal parasites. So we've invested in internal parasites kind of continuously because it is such a big issue as well for farmers. And with drench resistance increasing, it's becoming even more so. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of projects that have recently finished and then a couple that are still ongoing. So these projects were led by Dave Lethwick at AgResearch. The first one was looking at the impact of pre-lamb drenching with a long-acting product on ewe growth, body condition score, and fecundity. And we also took a look at the microbiome of the gut on animals that were drenched with long-acting product and not. And what was found here is that there's unlikely to be a financial benefit resulting from administering a long-acting drench product pre-lambing. And this is important just for farmers to understand when they're making parasite management decisions, any risks or benefits associated, especially because long-acting drench products are known to give a higher risk of drench resistance. And the microbiome, there were changes between ones that were drenched and not, but what these changes mean is unknown. It was the first study of its kind, so further work would have to be done to actually understand what that actually means. The next project was in cattle and looking at the effectiveness of ivermectin drench actually getting to the parasites in the gut by 3 different application methods. So oral drenching, pour-on, and injection was used. And it was found that the application method depended on the parasites they were actually targeting. So most parasites were, the application method that was the most effective was oral drench, but for Osteotargia, it was actually injection. So again, this is just important information for vets and farmers to know when making parasite management decisions. On to one of the projects that is still going on at the moment is a case study in the Wairarapa at a finishing farm that has triple drench resistance. So this was comparing the introduction of refugia of lambs that were coming onto the property and comparing it with quarantine drenching, which is the normal protocol, and to see if it improved triple drench resistance status over time. So this was a group of breeders and farmers working together. There's about 25 participants, I believe, and they all got their drench resistance status by doing a fecal egg count reduction test and then shared all their results. So everyone knew exactly what they were buying in terms of parasites. And it's this whole idea of not taking a gamble, rather, you know what parasites you're actually bringing onto your property so you can make effective parasite management decisions and you don't have this wheel of parasites of a gamble you're taking. So early indications of this program suggest that it is improving the triple drench resistance status, but to actually confirm these results, we have to wait for a year or 2 to make sure that is still consistent. And the last project I'll talk about is creating impact through communication. So as I said earlier, one of the most important things for us is to be able to communicate the research findings. And so we're using parasite management as a case study for this to assess the impact of 5 different channels of communication. So we've got an animated video, a drench-wise poster of drenching techniques, a podcast where 3 farmers talk about how they farm in the face of drench resistance, the Wormwise workshops, and also the Wormwise e-learning module. So we've engaged Scarlatti to help us out with this, and they have designed an impact model which compares all of these different communication channels to each other, and they've forecast change resulting from each communication method. And these are based on assumptions. And we're using surveys to inform this model and inform those assumptions. So the first survey we did was an initial online survey to see how far the campaign reached and also to see what the baseline practice is of farmers. And then we'll do a follow-up survey next month, and this is to see if any of the communication methods used actually caused people to change their parasite management practice. So did it cause behavioural change? So the ultimate aim of this is to assess what communication channels supported change. So where should we be putting our investment in terms of communicating this research so that we'll use it for other projects as well. And I believe there's a poll question coming up. We were just going to ask if anyone has seen these communication methods. Here we go. So have you actually seen any of these communication channels? And you can answer as many as you like.
5 more seconds. Okay, we're done.
Oh, great. So yeah, there is still a few that haven't seen it, so that is good. Now you know they're there. And then we had one other poll question, which I think will be coming up shortly. So in the past 12 months, what have you done in relation to parasite management?
Five more seconds. Yeah, we are done. Yep.
Awesome. So a lot have talked to their vet. That's great. Thank you for that. Okay, so the last slide. So ongoing, we'll be continuing with education and communication in terms of parasite management. An example of this is media releases that we put out when required. This one was put out jointly with AgResearch over the last month or so, and just talking about the importance of quarantine drench and how important it is with increasing drench resistance. And obviously the worm-wise workshops are also, there's quite a few of them on at the moment. So looking to the future, we are working on what the strategy looks like for the future needs of parasite management. With drenches failing more often, we need to understand this a bit better and see what research is required for farmers to be able to to farm with minimal or no drench. We want to preserve the drenches we do have, so this is something we really need to consider and understand more. Also, whether we can create some kind of operational workflow with all the case studies and the research we've done to date, can we build that into a more cohesive package? And then also in the back of our minds is the potential for an alternative test for the fecal egg count reduction test. As I'm sure most of you know, it is a blunt tool, but it's the best we've got. So is there ways we can improve that? And just a note that all our projects that we're currently investing in and the ones that have recently finished up are on the research webpage. So you can check those out. It'll tell you a bit about the project and how much we're investing in them, and also contact people for the pieces of work. So you can always get in touch with them if you need more information. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Cara. Always good to hear what the research crew are up to. Now, the first question's come through, and Dan has offered to help you out on this one, but I'll throw it to you first. Can you explain the fibroblast relevance to FE? My understanding is that they work to create proteins in the body, for example, collagen.
So it was really just another tissue sample to trial, because it is something that is taken from the animal, and to see if any of those markers would be found within them. So the fibroblast, I didn't actually mention that, they didn't work as well as the blood and saliva, so at the moment we're not progressing with those anyway. But I don't know, Dan, you might have something else to add.
That was exactly what I would have said, Cara. Great answer.
Thank you.
Always good to have everyone on the same page. Next question, what is the best thing breeders can do to help research initiatives you have outlined to be successful?
It's a good question. I think it's that whole thing of just making sure we communicate. So I think, yeah, Sarah and I have talked a lot about just making sure that we are, just communicating about these kind of research projects more often. And then there will be chances as well to input into these programs. So I think it's just about keeping that communication open.
Yeah, great. And I guess on that line, can farmers get involved in the FE program?
Yes, definitely. So we will, so at the moment the proposal is, I'm assuming they're meaning the big program. So at the moment the proposal is with potential co-funders for review, and then we will be talking to the Farmer Research Advisory Group about it. And if we are successful, then we'll definitely be getting a wider reach to farmers to help us, just for their input and obviously samples. And then if there's any tools, we would definitely want them to be on board from day one.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. In light of the alarming rise in drench resistance and the number of farms dealing with this problem, is there a plan to develop a Wormwise 2 dealing with resistance workshop?
I think I will throw this one to Dan.
Yeah.
Mr. Wormwise.
Yeah, absolutely, thanks. So I guess there's two things to that. So that's a good point, right? That's a Wormwise question as opposed to a beef and lamb question specifically. A Wormwise is just going through a strategy review just at the moment. Paul Crick and Robert Peacock and others were from the Farmer Council were involved in that process, and it has literally landed in my email box this afternoon, the sort of final shot of that. And that really will take, the goal there is it would really like to take Wormwise from doing what it's doing at the moment, which is having some impact, but perhaps not having as much impact as it could, and really turning it up. It was part of the offer we took around the around the referendum levy vote to go out to really put a lot of effort into improving our effort on Wormwise. So that's all part of that conversation there, Kate, that was from, wasn't it? Yeah, so I couldn't answer it right now, but that's in action as we speak.
Great, thanks, Dan. Is there any research planned on comparing wormfeck and Cara so either genetic trait can be used by breeders?
Not that I am aware of in our realm.
Might have Richard Shaw online, actually. He may be able to add to this.
I think that's more of an AgResearch question,
Yeah.
or a genetics question rather than Cara.
I'm not sure if Richard's online, but
yeah, I'm here.
Thanks, Richard. Don't know if you've got any answer to that, but if you have, go for it.
Yeah, look, it's something I've actually just trying to do a little bit of pushing within AgResearch. I'm hoping our next round of internal funding we can get something extra going. We've shown some really good stuff in the deer industry, and let's just see whether, I know that there's more and more breeders looking for some better answers, and I think both tools have their usefulness, and it's just a matter of getting the right information. I think we've all been a little bit remiss in the last few years about looking for not so much what's the best tool, but what's the most effective tool for breeders and then ultimately for farmers to use. I think we've just missed that story a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thanks, Richard. Cara, another FE question. When the FE test project is finished, how will farmers be able to access it?
So it'll be through commercial laboratories. So in that final stage, we'll be working with commercial laboratories who are interested, basically so that it is up and running and ready by the end of the project. That's the goal.
Yeah, great. And one more FE question. At the FE Gold meeting in Napier, Russell proposed a research fee to add to FE dosing to help fund and support future research. Is this still needed? And how do we keep together as a coalition of the willing on improving FE tolerance options for the industry?
That might be, Dan might be able to answer that question in terms of a funding scheme, but.
So that's first I've heard of that. I guess I wasn't at that FE Gold meeting there. In terms of funding at the moment from an industry point of view, we, Beef and Lamb has decided, and as we've been out through the referendum, as I said before, that this is a really important thing for us and we're going to invest levy funds in it. And as Cara and Axel are meeting with our industry partners and MPI, I'd like to think that we don't need other funding over and above that to help fund that research, right? This is what we're going to decide what we'd like to do, put some costs next to it and say, go and find the money to do it. The second question, how do we keep together a coalition of the willing? I'm really keen for that to carry on and happy for feedback, Annie and others, as to how we do that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dan. And I think that's all we have for you, Cara. Thank you very much for joining us. And as Cara mentioned, on our website, you'll find the updates that Cara shared with us, along with the recently completed projects. So thanks again. Now we're going to move on to our interactive Q&A workshop sessions. First up, we're going to discuss nProve for breeders. From the outset of the nProve project, breeders have been very open about the range of tech savviness across their business and where their best use of time is spent either in the office or out on farm. Each individual in our breeder community has their own position that works for them. It's with this in mind that we've developed nProve. You will have seen the industry-facing screens released last year, developed with commercial farmers in mind. Tonight, we want to share insight into the more substantial breeder-facing screens, which allow much more interaction for those who want it. We have been working with early adopter breeders and bureaus to test drive the nProve breeder functionality, and we were fortunate enough to have been able to record a couple of these breeders who have recently taken nProve for a spin, willing to share their initial feedback and perspectives with you. For those of you who haven't had a chance to watch the pre-recorded session on YouTube, here is a short snippet of what was discussed.
My bureau sent through some selection lists and had a little bit of a play around with them. And yeah, it worked pretty well. I was able to sort them up and just took some of the bottom performing animals off and just did a little bit of a selection, just played around with some of the figures there. So that worked pretty well. I was reasonably happy. I was able to actually put it onto Excel as well and download it onto Excel. So that worked pretty well. Yeah, I'm reasonably probably better on Excel than I am on that. And I was able to actually get all the data up on the big screen, so that worked pretty well. Yeah, I think it's a really, really good start.
Yeah, so it was really user friendly. To begin with, our civil bureau had set up a series of views of selection lists, size summaries, dam summaries. So the information was already pre-set up, but it was really nice and easy to change, to adapt the views that I was working with. So for example, if we're working through a selection list and there were traits that I wanted to look at that weren't on there, just add columns. Or if, for example, we've got quite a few different flocks within our system, so you could add and remove flocks or add and remove animals. Yeah, it was really, really easy to put in different criteria to filter and then sort. You could sort the data on any of the traits that you wanted to, depending on what you were looking at, and you can save those views for later. I think just get familiar with it. Yeah, it's a really, from what I've experienced, nice, easy system to use. Yeah, just get acquainted with it, and that'll probably be the best way to get your value out of it.
thanks to all the breeders and bureaus for taking the time to provide us your feedback. And again, thanks to Will and Emma for recording these sessions. With only a very short time and playing with nProve, you provided us some really great perspectives. So thanks again for that. Now we're going to open the floor to questions to David or the breeders who have trialled nProve. So Emma Pettigrew, Will Jackson, and we've also got Simon Buckley. So we've got a few questions that have come through from breeders and things before tonight. So we'll start with a few of those while the rest of you have a chance to send some in. So David, can you tell us why commercial farmer screens were developed first?
So before we built anything, we went out and did workshops. We did workshops with breeders and bureaus in terms of what tools they were looking for, but we also did the same with commercial farmers. And we quickly found they were two very different things. A lot of the breeders describe themselves as not being that technical, but when you actually got down to brass tacks of what they wanted, they actually did want quite sophisticated information. And they, breeders and bureaus are in the systems week in, week out, whereas a lot of the commercial farmers, what they were looking for is something where they can drop in when they're looking for genetics at a certain time each year and quickly find what they want. So they really were two very different things. And the amount of effort to build what was required for the breeders and bureaus was significantly larger than what was needed for the commercial farmers. So we were able to deliver the commercial farmer content out quite early, but it took us quite a lot longer to build up the functionality and features that were required for the breeders and bureaus.
Yeah, great. And is there going to be an nProve app rather than just a website?
So at the moment, before nProve, we're having to maintain, it's quite expensive, lots of different software. We've got software that runs on Windows. We've got software that runs on the web, is another copy of it. And then we've got versions that we have to maintain for Apple and Android. So one of the big things that we wanted to do with nProve is really just create a single tool. When you go to nProve.nz, it does look at the device you're on, a mobile or an iPad or a computer, and does adapt itself accordingly. So for that reason, we really do want to avoid going down that app path. But maybe this is a good chance to throw to Emma, Simon, and Will, because when you were using the app, you're just in your web browser. It's not a some software that you were able to install or an app. Did that encumber you, or did it feel like it was sort of compromised in any way when you were playing with it?
Perhaps we'll go to Emma first.
For me personally, I do all of my work on the laptop, generally with a couple of screens going. So it wouldn't make much sense for me to have the app in that sense. It could be really handy to have a basic version of the app. So like when I'm out on farm collecting data or something like that, so a ewe comes past and you sort of want to just have a bit better look at what we know about her. You can still do it just via the web page on the mobile device. But yeah, it's just, I haven't actually played with it on a mobile device very much, so I don't know how user-friendly or easy it is on that.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
because also if you had no bandwidth too, an app would be quite handy for you out on farm. That makes sense.
What about you, Simon?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of pretty wedded to my iPad and use that predominantly. But for me, it does everything that I need it to do or I want it to do. If there's something a bit more technical or involved, then I just pass it off to Emma, and she'll do it on the, on her desktop or something. But no, I mean it's very versatile. It's got a whole lot of functionality, and I can't see, in our situation anyway, you can't talk for everyone, that it does. It's an amazing tool. It's giving us all sorts of flexibility that we didn't previously have or know that we had. We probably did, if the bureaus could do more for us, but we've just been, accustomed to sort of taking listings and reports that they've provided and, use them like that without trying to do anything different with them.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Simon. How about you, Will?
Yeah, like I found it quite good. I was just looking. One thing I looked at today was I can adjust my summaries on nProve, download them into Excel, and then update my adjusted Excel spreadsheets and put them into my XR, which in the past I've always had to do that with in conjunction with my bureau. And so if the list isn't quite what I want, I've got to go backwards and forwards. So that I can adjust my selection list to fit my criteria. So I found that to be quite good. I think like a lot of people can use it for whatever they want. So it's, if you're not that au fait with the technology, you can probably breeze over it and get a bit out of it. Or if you really want to go down into the weeds, you probably can. So I think it'll be good for a varying amount of breeders, probably.
I think your example is quite a good one too, Will, because you declared your hand quite early that you're not going to be wanting to spend ages digging down into the weeds. You did expect that when you came in that your bureau would already have set things up for you ready to go. But then, like you say, you can still make those little adjustments and find adjustments off those foundations that you sort of get to kick you off with what you're used to getting from your bureau.
Yeah, I think, David, the thing that I would say would be, if you make it simple for people and you make the information easy to access, then a lot of breeders will probably then look a bit deeper into it. So if you make it simple and easy to go through, then I'll probably use it more. So yeah, that's all I'd say.
Makes sense.
That's great. Thanks, Will. So David, if breeders want to start using nProve tomorrow, what should they do?
So we're basically working through what we'd consider an early adopter program. So some of the breeders that you've heard from tonight, we've shoulder tapped because they were involved in the genetics of beef and lamb genetics advisory group. And so it was a good way of sort of providing first-hand visibility in there. But the bureaus are keeping lists of their clients that are keen to be early adopters and getting in early. So first most, just make it known to your bureau that you're keen to have a play. You can also drop us a note on our info email address. That's in the email that would have been sent out for the event as well, and we'll work with your bureau to get you pushed up the list and get a login.
When will all breeders be given a login?
So I guess that, in a way that's related to the previous question. I mean, we want to work with the early adopter breeders, those that are keen to get in and give the system a good exercising. And we'd like to see, a successful outcome of that before we, spread it out to the broad audience. So I guess we'll see how quickly and how well things go with the early adopter breeders. And then after that, we'll then spread it out wider.
Yeah, cool. This is a question that sort of, I think, inadvertently came from you, Will. You made the comment that the commercial farmer screens is very visual and not so much the table of figures like a lot of breeders are used to. Can you explain why that's been designed like that, David?
Yep. And it wasn't just Will. We got a lot of feedback from breeders about that. That we really did get two completely different sets of feedback from the breeders versus the commercial farmers. It was a lot more different than we were expecting. Look, breeders are used to seeing tables of numbers. That's the natural state that, in terms of the raw amount of information that you're working with. But the feedback that we got from the commercial farmers, including those on the beef side of things as well, was, don't give me a table of numbers and expect me to work out what the breed average is versus this number. If you already know what the breed average is and what the spread is, just give it to me as a percentile. And if you can show me that visually, so I can just see this is bigger than that, all the better. And throughout those workshops with the commercial farmers, at the end we'd ask if there's any other questions. I think it might have been every workshop. If not, it was virtually every workshop. The beef breeders would ask, this looks great. Will we be able to have it for our beef as well? And we've had some other meetings related to some of our beef projects as well, where we've had similar feedback. So the feedback from commercial farmers really was, look, I'm just going to be in here for 5 minutes once a year to get a steer. It should be intuitive, visual. I don't want to, do a, like they don't want to dive into it to anywhere near the depths that breeders do. That being said, I should say we have been collecting a laundry list of items from breeders that, to make a long story long, before you turn off Ramfinder and FlockFinder, you better add these following functions to nProve. So we've the commercial side, like for example, an option for breeders to get a table of data out rather than the visual, and a bunch of other things like that. So we do have a list of those features that breeders are expecting to be added to those industry-facing screens for their purposes.
Awesome. Thanks for that, team. I think that's our time, but if anyone's got any further questions on nProve, as David mentioned, please feel free to email our info inbox or give us a call. Thanks again to Simon, Emma and Will for joining us for that session. That was really great, and yeah, really appreciate your time providing your feedback over the last week or so. So now we're going to move to our methane workshop with Suzanne Rowe of AgResearch. Again, for those of you who haven't watched the pre-recorded content, this is available on our YouTube channel, and the link will be circulated again in our forum wrap-up email. But in the meantime, I'll introduce Suzanne, and I think perhaps we can just do a quick recap, Suzanne, of some of the key points that were raised in the video before we get some questions through. So to reiterate what's been shared in the recording, Suzanne, if I'm a breeder interested in recording methane, where do I start?
So you would start by going to the website, www.methanebv.co.nz. It's in the presentation. So there's a website that David set up a couple of years ago now, and it has all the protocols, what you would need to do before you got your animals measured, so you can have a good look and think about whether it's manageable for you. And then if you're interested, there's an expression of interest, which isn't a commitment. You just basically put in a few details, express your interest, say, I'm interested, these are my animals, so these are the numbers, this is the area that I'm in. And Neville Amies, who's looking after the program, is going to give you a call and have a chat with you. And if you decide that you're more than interested and you want to sign up, then from that point forward, Neville can start looking at booking you in, going through what's required. And Barry Van Vliet, who's running the trailer at the moment, will be the next on the phone, basically to make sure that you know what you're in for, that your driveway's wide enough to get the trailer up, that you've got sufficient, things like water and power, and then Neville will be back on the phone helping you to put your animals into the correct groupings. It's really important that we measure animals in groups that are balanced, so groups of 12, and from then on it's we've actually had a big change in the last few months. When we started the research program, we were measuring animals twice, 2 weeks apart, which is a huge commitment. But we've managed to gather something like 15,000 measures over the last few years, and having been out on the road for a couple of years and got enough data together, we've basically rerun the stats several times and come to the conclusion that as long as we measure enough animals per sire, we can cut down to one visit per breeder, and that's made obviously a big difference to logistics. So currently we are still in research breeding value phase, but it's going really, really well. We've seen variation on every farm that we've visited. So we've seen, high methane and low methane animals existing in every breed that we've looked at. The breeding values are being generated on a weekly basis. So it's looking really good to move forward to a stage where we're out of the research PV stage.
Yeah, great. And that's a nice segue actually to another question. So I've gone and measured methane. It's been loaded to SIL. I can get a report from my bureau with my methane breeding values. What can I then do with them?
Yes, there's a couple of things. One, remember that less is best. So more negative values are the ones that you're looking for. At the moment, the breeding value is just for methane straight. Now, methane is connected to intake. So if an animal eats less, it'll have less methane. So if you only selected on your methane BV and you ignored everything else, then you'd be in danger of selecting for smaller animals or animals that weren't eating very much. So I guess that's one word of caution. And the reason that we did that, the reason that we produced a BV just for absolute methane on itself, is so it can go into the index without double counting. So we don't want it to clash with intake or live weight or growth. We don't want to be double counting things. So it goes in and it would fit in with an index, whether that be maternal plus methane or an environmental index or into the maternal index, whichever way it goes. So at the moment, what we're advocating is either take your breeding values and take a threshold and say, okay, these are the animals that I want to choose, and then go through and sort out on methane. Or what we've been doing is we've been adding them to the index by valuing methane, and we value it at $100 a ton. So we multiply our methane breeding value by around about $6.80, which is high. And probably I wouldn't advocate that a commercial breeder did that. I'd probably say start with half that number and assume sort of $50 a ton CO2 equivalent, and then add that onto your index and see how they stack up. So yeah, we can help you with that. We can go through it, but at the moment, basically our advice is rank your animals on production like you normally would. Take your top rams, have a look at them, and there's going to be some differences there in high and low methane, and you can pick out your low emitters that way.
Yeah, great. So what's the goal? How much do you think it can be reduced?
So we've been pretty cautious, and we've been thinking that 0.5 to 1% is probably where we'll end up, because we don't want to take selection pressure off other traits. We've put it into research flock at Woodlands, and it's actually decreasing a bit quicker than that. It's more like 2% a year at the moment, but we'll keep an eye on it and see how it goes. But we're confident that 0.5 to 1% is achievable.
Yeah, great. I think this was a question asked at the forum in Napier, but it probably doesn't hurt to repeat it. Is there much variation in methane production between breeds?
We're actually seeing similar amount of variation in all the breeds. When we started off measuring, we saw a bit of difference between the Texel and the Romney. The Texel looking like it was a bit lower, but over time we've basically seen pretty much the same variation regardless of breed. So it seems like it's it's segregating regardless of whatever that you're using.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Suzanne. I don't know that we've had any more questions come through, but if there are, oh, hang on, there's one that's just popped up as I said that. Where do you expect the price of carbon to get to?
I don't know, it would be a guess. There's several reports out that talk about several $100s. So estimates are anywhere from $20 to $400. And I really don't know. And of course, it will depend on how we sort of decide the global warming potential of methane. If we stick to 28 times, then that's going to make a big difference if we change that and we treat gases differently. So I'm not sure at the moment. $100 a ton, I think, is a perfectly reasonable assumption for something that is going to impact in 2 or 3 generations' time. But yeah, and it's a guessing game. But the government has been advised by the Climate Change Commission that within a year they need to give us a number, because unless we have a figure, we can't plan. So they have to come up with some sort of expectation of, you know, what we can expect them to value things at, so we can get on and start planning and looking at these numbers.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Suzanne. So again, for those who didn't get a chance to watch Suzanne's recording prior to this forum tonight, it is on our Beef and Lamb YouTube channel, and Suzanne has spent quite a lot of time and detail explaining the process further than we have tonight. So do go and have a look, and link back to the website, as she mentioned, if you're keen on measuring. I think we do have Russell Prophet online with us, who might just share a little about his experience with measuring on farm. Have we got you there, Russell?
Russell, looks like you're off mute. If you talk, we should be able to hear you.
Yep. Can you hear me all right?
Yep,
Yep,
we sure can. Thanks, Russell. Did you hear Sarah's question, Russell? Oh, sorry, Sarah, I think we've just lost him again.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's back on yet, but otherwise we might just move on to our next section. Sorry, Russell, we'll come back to you. So thanks, Suzanne, again for your time and recording all of that stuff. It's really great to have it in one place, and good to go back to and refer. So again, if you're interested, go and have a look at the video and the links that are in there. Dan Breyer, our General Manager of Beef and Lamb Genetics, is going to round up the evening by recognising individuals who have dedicated much of their lives to this industry. These valued members of our sheep genetics community have contributed so much to our industry, both independently and as part of our Beef and Lamb Genetics team. Dan wasn't sure if he was going to be able to make it live tonight, so we've actually pre-recorded this section to make sure that we were able to deliver it, as it is a very important part of our program. So we're going to play his video now.
One of the things we wanted to do while we were all together in Napier was acknowledge and celebrate some of the people who have made our industry the success that it is. Obviously, we didn't get as far as the dinner in Napier, but we still like to take that opportunity, recognise those people and thank them for their contribution. First, Cheryl Ann Newman. Cheryl Ann has been involved in SIL since its inception in 1998, where she has been the engineer of SIL's genetic engine for almost 2 decades. The New Zealand sheep industry has benefited hugely from what is considered the world's leading sheep genetic evaluation system, and Cheryl Ann's dedication to the space has been instrumental in SIL's success. While many scientists work within their individual fields, she has developed knowledge across all facets of the evaluation so that new trait measurements could be entered and included into analyses without affecting existing results. Her work on enhancements to the SIL system has increased the number of traits analysed, improved the accuracy of the evaluation, and introduced auditing tools designed to lift the data quality. She has been recognised nationally for her work with SIL, receiving the Sir Arthur Ward Award in 2017, presented by the New Zealand Society of Animal Production. She is only the second woman to receive that award in its 40-year history. Neville Amies. Neville has been with the AgResearch team for over 40 years and is currently the head of the Ruakura-based Ramguard testing service. He is involved in the Methane BV program, coordinating bookings and the logistics of getting AgResearch's packed trailer around the country to ensure breeders can have their methane emissions measured on farm. Neville has been involved with the SIL system for a number of years, developing the day-to-day operations required to keep SIL running smoothly. During that time, he has worked in the animal breeding and research area, collecting and analysing animal data for genetic improvement. He has also worked as the database manager for the last 20 years and has been involved in implementing and testing of new developments into SIL. John McEwen. John has been at the forefront of some of New Zealand's most significant genetic-based productivity gains in farm livestock in recent decades. His career in agriculture began in 1978 when he took up a temporary position at Woodlands Research Institute as a technician and later as a scientist. In 1985, he spent a year working in Ireland before returning to work at Invermay. He has been involved with the establishment of both SIL and the Central Progeny Test. His work has included looking at how to improve the rate of genetic progress on lean and meaty sheep using the CT scanner with Neville Jobson and calculating breeding values. John has helped to develop the worm FEC breeding service, the LoinMax, MyoMax, Inverdale and microphthalmia gene tests, and building genotyping platforms for research and commercial application. More recently, he has worked closely with the Pastoral Greenhouse Gas Research Consortium to help reduce methane emissions from our livestock. Claire Kello. Claire is the General Manager of the New Zealand Animal Breeding Trust, founded by Massey University and AgResearch. She has been involved in animal breeding and recording since the inception of the National Flock Recording Scheme in 1967, with previous roles as a Specialist Farm Advisory Officer with the Department of Agriculture at Ruakura, later absorbed into the Farm Advisory Division in Hamilton, and Chair of the Sheep Plan Technical Group, working alongside industry icons such as Al Ray, Neil Clark and Clive Dalton. She has been recognised at the Beef and Lamb New Zealand Sheep Industry Awards. In 2013, Claire was presented with an award for the individual or business making a significant contribution to the New Zealand sheep industry. In addition to her work with the sheep performance recording industry, Claire owns AgriTour Associates, a company which showcases New Zealand agriculture by sharing our farming practices, technology and research to international clients who travel here. This work has included a stretch as the president of the Latin American New Zealand Business Council, during which time she travelled with the Prime Minister John Key on his 2013 trade mission to Latin America. And Gordon Levitt. The Kikitangio dispersal sale in February of this year marks more than 70 years' contribution to the New Zealand sheep industry. Gordon has been flock recording since 1951, initially using a card index system he developed until the introduction of the country's National Flock Recording Scheme in 1967. He has been recognised nationally and internationally for breeding sheep that are resistant to parasites and other ailments that plague farmers. He has dedicated 34 years of breeding for worm resistance to the Kikitangio Romney stud, including initiating the formation of WormFEC Gold with like-minded breeders. Other notable achievements include a citation from the Royal Society for Services to Agriculture, an Innovation Award from Beef and Lamb New Zealand, a Balanced Farm Environment Award, and a New Zealander of the Year Award. He has for 23 years been on the New Zealand Sheep Breeders Association Council with 2 years as president and is a life member. Gordon has sourced, multiplied and sold the Scotch thistle gal fly for biological control, donating half of the proceeds of that to the Red Cross. And he was the first breeder in the country to pay for embryo transfer in sheep in the 1970s, taking eggs from his top 10 producing ewes and transplanting them into the rest of the flock. Gordon's 3 daughters and their partners will continue to own and work the farm, and Gordon and Trish will live on in the homestead first built by his grandfather. And lastly, we'd like to acknowledge the passing of Holmes Warren earlier this year. Holmes is an instrumental figure in the sheep industry and fondly referred to as the father of the modern Romney. Holmes, along with his son Mike, operated the Turanganui Romney stud in the southern Wairarapa, one of New Zealand's oldest and largest sheep studs. The Warren family have been among this country's innovative in sheep breeding, and Holmes is often referred to as one of the founders of North Island Romney, a genetic package that has had a big impact on the productivity of this country's ewe flock. Holmes was one of the founding members of the Wairarapa Romney Improvement Group alongside Bill Hume and John Daniel. Holmes' service to the sheep industry were recognised with an MBE in 1992 and a New Zealand Sheep Industry Lifetime Achievement Award from Beef and Lamb in 2015. His work continues to have a strong influence on today's national flock and will continue to do so for many years. As the Whakatauki says, Kui hingia o te tautura o te wainui a tānei. A great tautura has fallen.
On behalf of Beef and Lamb Genetics, we'd like to thank all of you for your ongoing contribution, which continues to better our industry for all. To all of you for tuning in, thank you for joining us. We hope you've been able to take away some interesting perspectives and insights to implement within your business. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of your evening.